Hello and welcome. My name is Eric Farewell and this is the Aviator Show. Today we're bringing you guys the very first in a new series called Refining Paramotor. This is all about refining your skills, and it's led by my very good friend and the school manager of the school you see right behind me, AJ Goen. AJ is amazing, great pilot, fantastic instructor, and here he's going to break down some of the more fine aspects of the sport. Enjoy.
Hello aviators, and welcome back to the Red Barn. I'm AJ Goen, I'm the lead instructor here at Aviator Paramotor, and today I'm going to do a video on how to control a roll oscillation. Alright, so first things first, let's talk about this is not going to be a replacement for actual instruction. This is going to be more of a supplemental information that's meant to have a base foundation of already receiving training, or maybe you're planning on going to get training at some point. This can go ahead and help lead you into that. So first things first, what is a roll oscillation? It's basically you being underneath your wing and it rocking back and forth on the roll axis. Sometimes these can build very heavily and get to the point where you're actually losing altitude as you're going through them. Those would be a severe case and essentially what leads up into wingovers. But it can also just be due to turbulent conditions and you getting rocked around. What causes an oscillation? There's a few acting forces that can cause this. One being a very heavily loaded wing with power, another being pilot input, pilot error, timing those brake inputs incorrectly, causing the wing to build up into oscillations. Turbulent conditions, it could be also caused from entering and exiting a turn too steeply or too fast. Before I go any further though, I just want to say that all these things that you're going to be learning, if you go out and try any of this stuff, I recommend obviously getting lots of altitude. And when I say lots of altitude, I want 3,000 to 4,000 feet above ground level. And you do not want to be going any lower than 1,000 feet above ground level. This is going to give you plenty of room for air. One of the problems is going to be that you're going to be looking up at your wing very often and you're not going to be paying attention to the ground. So you need to make sure that you're constantly being aware of your surroundings as well as understanding how high you are and maintaining that 1,000-foot hard deck. Going along with that, you're also going to want to have at least one reserve. It's very important to fly with a reserve regardless of if you're doing maneuvers or trying to learn new things or not. Reserves are very safe, proven to work, and so I recommend having that as well. If I'm flying out in smooth, calm conditions, which I recommend doing for learning this, and we'll just manufacture our own oscillation by pulling that right brake down to our shoulder and holding it for about 2 seconds. That's going to initiate a small turn. Then we're going to exit that really abruptly by getting that hand back up very fast. That's going to allow us to enter a turn, but then exit that turn and just start rolling back and forth. Now, realistically, what you're going to find is if you do nothing for probably 2 to 3 rotations, it's going to sort itself out on its own. That's a pretty small example, but regardless, this is how we're going to learn it. You're going to pull that right brake down to your shoulder and maybe even a little bit more for about 2 seconds and release quickly. Now you're just going to start to fall back through that swing, right? So now we've got ourselves into an oscillation. So let's go ahead and get into what stops a roll oscillation. The easiest and best way as a beginner pilot to stop an oscillation on the wings that you're going to be flying or you have flown in training is to reduce your brake pressure by going hands up and releasing power. The combination of those two things stops inputting forces into the wing, allowing the wing to settle back down, get under control, and fly straight and level. Once you get back to that position, then you can add your power and turn accordingly. But it takes a couple of rotations sometimes for that wing to settle down, so you have to release the power, go hands up. Probably with 1 or 2 rotations, the wing starts to level back off and getting back on its straight heading. The great thing about these A and B rated beginner wings that you use in training is that they have a tendency to want to keep you safe. They want to fly straight and level, and all we do as pilots is tend to screw that up. One of the other ways to stop an oscillation is to enter a very slow turn. The problem with entering a very slow turn is typically what I find in students as they go into this turn, inevitably they end up pulsing the brake at the exact wrong time because they start to turn too much and then start to fall through and need more brake, and then they basically just build this oscillation up or continue the oscillation going as they follow through the turn. But that is one way to stop the oscillation, is to slowly pull that brake down and enter that turn, but you have to maintain that brake pressure. You can't be pulsing that brake up and down or inputting any other external forces such as adding power or releasing power or stopping a weight shift or adding more weight shift. It's got to be one smooth fluid motion to stop and hold that position. Last of all, and one of my favorite ways to stop an oscillation, and the best way to stop an oscillation, is to active pilot, is to understand when and why to pull a certain brake, and you can typically stop that oscillation, especially once you get very good at it, within one brake pull. And so that's what we're going to get into next, is how to stop that oscillation with just pulling that brake at the right time. Our intuition is counterintuitive. It's exactly the opposite of what we need to do to stop this oscillation. I would say more than 90% of students, if we were to just give them the brakes on a tandem ride and tell them to stop the oscillation, which is exactly what we do, they're going to time it incorrectly and pull the wrong brake. The reason being is because when you're out kiting, you're on the ground and you're standing there, and we use our feet to move back and forth underneath the wing to keep that wing over our heads. Right? And so if the wing falls over to your right or my left, if you're watching this video, what I end up doing is I step underneath the low side of the wing, causing it to come back up, all while pulling that right brake, okay? But when we're in the air and we're flying around and we get into the situation, we're already gonna swing underneath this wing. We're a pendulum on the end of this swing, basically, swinging back and forth. So we don't need to pull the brake to bring it back over. We're already gonna swing underneath the swing. So kiting is exactly the opposite of flying when it comes to which side to pull to get the wing back over our head. So let's keep in mind that it's probably gonna take a few tries to get this figured out. So that's where that altitude is gonna come into play, and be expected to mistime it a couple of times or pull the wrong brake a couple of times. And what ends up happening in this case is they actually build exponentially. So instead of dampening this oscillation, you're actually going to build it up significantly. So you need to be prepared for that, and that's where that altitude and reserve is going to come into play, just as a backup scenario, worst case scenario. So there's multiple different ways to think about how to stop this oscillation, and the easiest way to consider is you're going to pick one wingtip to watch. So when you're flying around and you get into a swing, let's say you're just swinging back and forth on a roll oscillation like this, you're going to want to pick one wingtip to look at and watch. I like to say my right wingtip, and the reason why is because typically you've only got a brake in this right hand. We train left-hand throttles, so most people are using a left-hand throttle. This just makes it easier, always to look at your right wingtip until you really get this dialed in and figured out. So what we're going to do for this scenario is we're going to look at that right wingtip only, and that's all we're going to look at. So let's say we get into this oscillation and we're swinging underneath this wing. I'm constantly looking at that wingtip. And what's happened is this wingtip has gone high, and now it's gone low. And now it's gone high, and now it's gone low. And I'm just constantly watching that. So how we stop this oscillation is we wait for this wingtip to come down to its lowest point. Once it hits that lowest point and it starts to apex and come back up, I'm gonna pull this exact same brake. So the right brake down and hold as that wing comes back up, and then release as soon as I stop swinging. If you do that correctly, if you put enough input into it and time it correctly, you'll stop that oscillation within one swing. This is where it gets tricky though. There's a lot of little nuanced things that goes along with this. First off, the bigger the oscillation, the more brake that you have to pull to stop this in one go. The next thing is the timing. Oftentimes people end up pulling too soon. So as their wing is coming down to the low point, they end up pulling too soon, and that actually just initiates a turn and ends up causing this to build up even more. So we want to make sure that we're waiting for that wing to come all the way down to the apex to stop, and as it starts to come back up, to then slowly engage that brake, and as much as you need until the wing stops. So this is going to be proportionate to how big this oscillation is. If, let's say, my wing comes down to the right side here on my right, or your left by watching this video, and I end up pulling, instead of the inside brake or the low side brake, let's say I actually pull the left side brake, what I'm going to be doing is erratically causing this wing to want to shoot back over to the left. This is essentially how you get into a wing over. And before I go any further, wing overs are pretty easy to do. But the danger is not in doing wing overs, it's exiting wing overs, and it builds extremely fast, and to the point where you're probably going to scare yourself, especially if you don't understand energy management or you've never done any of this maneuvers before. So we need to start with the very basics, and as we progress through all these future videos, you'll learn how to do them correctly, how to get into these situations correctly, and learn all these skills the right way. Now, again, on A and B rated wings, and even most C rated wings, they're very, very safe. And they will take care of you in most active conditions, but it's still a very good skill that you're going to want to have It makes you feel a lot more confident when you're in turbulent conditions and you know that you can control the wing and just not get jostled around and thrown off course constantly. Don't forget, guys, every single flight is your most important flight, so stay safe out there, keep flying, and look forward to see you guys in some blue skies.